I don't know what's in the air lately, but I have had so many conversations recently with people who have been teetering on the edge of burnout or are full-blown burnt out. It's a big deal. There are a lot of demands on all of us in this day and age, or at least most of us. And a lot of times it's really hard to navigate through it. It's hard to figure out where our limits are and what's okay with us and what's not okay with us. And often we will let things go for too long, and we'll pile that stress on and pile that stress on and pile that stress on, and eventually end up feeling crushed under all the pressure. And essentially that's what burnout is. And so today we're actually going to talk about some really clear signs that you're getting close to burnout or that you are fully there. And then in my next video, we're going to talk about how to deal with it and how to get through it and back to feeling like yourself again. But you need to know what the signs are, but so that you can know whether or not this is something that you are dealing with right now. If you are new to me and this is the first time that you are here, I am so glad you are here. If you are on the cusp of burnout or you're trying to figure out if you are, then you are in the right place. I have videos that talk about this kind of stuff. I talk about anxiety. I talk about boundaries. I talk about motivation. I talk about listening to ourselves, building our relationships with ourselves, managing our minds and emotions better, and kind of everything in between, and how all of these things are often so interconnected. So if you haven't subscribed already to my channel, please make sure that you do so now. But if you are new to me, welcome here. If you're not new to me, I'm so glad you're back. Let me know how you found me originally. If you're brand new or if you've been here for a while, let me know how you found me. I'd love to hear that as well. Let me know in the comment section below. But my name is Kristina. I am a registered clinical therapist, a researcher, a master coach, and the creator of the Breakthrough Coaching Program. I have a master's degree in counseling psychology, and I work to help heart-centered go-getter people break through worry, anxiety, and self-doubt so that they can get out of their heads, get into their lives, and love themselves and their lives more. And so this whole concept of burnout, if you're here and you're wondering if you are burning out, chances are that you are. So I'm glad that you're here. Good for you for looking into this and not just trying to keep pretending that everything is okay. Good for you for being willing to do some research and then hopefully do some work to deal with this one, to get past this one. And like I said, in my next video, I will be talking to you all about how to do that. But here's how to know for sure if you are burning out and not just going crazy for no good reason. And so now before we get into the specific signs of burnout, I think it's important that we go over the causes of burnout so that we really know what we're dealing with here. We really know what's going on and why this is happening in the first place. And so the first cause of burnout is working in a place where there are unclear expectations, where you don't know what you're really supposed to be doing on a daily basis, where things are really uncertain, where you go into work and you might sit there and say, what am I supposed to be working on today? What does this really look like? What's the goal? What's the plan? What's my role in all of this? And if you find that you're doing that on a regular basis, that is very emotionally and mentally taxing to have that continuous uncertainty. The next cause of burnout is too high of expectations. Now, this one might be super obvious. If you work for or with someone where the expectations are just really high and you feel like they're unfair and they're unreasonable and they're just unreachable, but you have this feeling that you need to do it anyways, that you need to reach those expectations. And so you push yourself extra hard. And again, obviously, that's really draining, that's really taxing, that's really depleting for us. And that in and of itself can cause burnout. The next one is not having any off time from work. So if you find that you're working all day and then you're going home and taking a few minutes to eat and clean up or do whatever you do for a few minutes at home, but then you're getting right back to work. And you're sitting at your computer or you're sitting at a desk and doing work all evening and you don't really have any time off. There's no boundary. There's no space between you and your job, or you feel like you're always answering texts and emails and messages on your phone, that your phone is dinging and binging and your computer is bonging and everything around you, where you feel like there's no space, there's no freedom from your work, that you are too reachable, that there's blurred lines between who you are as a person and who you are as an employee, or as someone who works somewhere, does some kind of work. When there is no space in there, that is very draining. When we always feel like we have to be on and available, that's not normal. That's not okay. And then the next thing that causes burnout, which is related to both the too high of expectations and the having no off time, is the lack of boundaries. If you don't have any boundaries for yourself in your job, you are going to burn out. If you're not able to say no, if everything that comes to you, you say yes and you take on and you agree to, and you never say no to anything, or you never ask whoever is giving you the task to prioritize. And what that means is, let's say you're in the middle of working on a project and they come to you and say, hey, can you take this thing on? And you just blindly, or just without even thinking, you say yes. Instead of saying, okay, I'm in the middle of working on this project with this deadline. Would you like me to finish this first and then start working on this next thing that you've given me? Or would you like me to put this one aside and push this deadline and then work on this new thing that you've given me, because I'm unable to do both things at the same time and still meet the expected deadlines? So that's a boundary. That's not just saying no flat out. That is being able to say, this is what I'm available for and this is what I'm not available for, and being able to do that in more of a professional setting. So that lack of boundaries, if you're taking everything on, and that often, if we are people who are taking everything on and saying yes to everything, there's something deeper going on. Chances are it's not just about worrying about getting fired if you don't do it all. It's this feeling of, I have to do it all to prove that I'm good enough, to prove that I'm worthy of being here, to prove that I deserve this job that I have, because maybe you feel like you're actually not good enough to be doing your job. So you feel like you have to do way more than everybody else just to feel qualified to be where you are. It's a whole other issue. But that lack of boundaries, getting curious about, why am I not allowing myself to set boundaries? Why am I taking it all on? The next thing that causes burnout is perfectionism and overfunctioning. It's really similar to what I just talked about, but if you insist on doing everything and doing everything perfectly, where the thought of making any kind of mistake or misstep makes you feel all kinds of uncomfortable, then there's some perfectionism going on. And perhaps you are taking longer than you're supposed to be taking to do a specific task, because you're going over it and double checking it and triple checking it and quadruple checking it and checking it over like 27 times, because you are so anxious about making any kind of mistake. It's exhausting. It's going to take you way longer to do something, which means you're going to be working way longer hours, which means you're not going to have any of that separation between yourself and your work life, which means that you're going to crumble under all the pressure. And yes, perfectionism is an offset of anxiety. So is overfunctioning. If you are someone who overfunctions, who takes on a lot, who has the attitude that if it's going to get done right, I have to do it myself. You take on extra things that you don't actually need to be taking on, because you feel like in order to get the job done right, you need to do it your way. Maybe you take on things from other people. If someone says, oh, I'm confused, I don't know how to do this, and one of your coworkers comes to you and says that they're not certain, instead of helping them do it or giving them a few resources for them to look at themselves, you say something like, oh, just let me do it. So then you add more to your plate. And that can be around people pleasing. Doesn't necessarily have to be that one specifically with anxiety, although often people pleasing as well is an offset of anxiety. But that overfunctioning, that perfectionism, that is gonna get you. The next thing is asking for help. Not being able to ask for help causes burnout. And again, Probably because you don't want to look like you don't know what you're doing. You don't want people to judge you. You don't want people to think that you're not qualified for the position that you have, and so you don't ask for help and then feel like you're crumbling under all the pressure of trying to get all these things done, don't really know what you're doing, or there's pieces that are missing that you don't really know, you've tried to figure out, you haven't been able to figure out, but you won't let yourself ask for help. So maybe it's an ego thing. We all have egos. It's just part of being human, but that is an ego thing when we tell ourselves that I don't want to ask for help because I don't want people to look at me a certain way. That's a fragile ego issue. We need to talk about and work on building up a solid sense of self so that you're able to say, hey, I need help. And there's no shame in needing some help. We are not all supposed to know all of everything. And then the other side of that not being able to ask for help can be the overfunctioning thing. This whole idea of no one's going to be able to do it better than me, and so I need to do it if it's going to get done right. So I'm not going to ask for help because no one's going to really know how to help me. The next thing that causes burnout is work dynamics. If you work in a place where there are a lot of people pushing a lot of your buttons and you don't know how to get yourself space from that, if you don't know how to not get pulled into it, if you don't know how to manage your mind around other people and whatever they have going on, and most of us don't because we weren't taught this stuff in school, how to not get sucked into whatever else is going on around us, then that's going to be draining. That's going to be emotionally exhausting if there are dynamics. And whenever you have people working together, there are dynamics. And sometimes they are pretty easy to navigate through, but often they are really hard. And most of us don't have the skills to manage ourselves in the wake of other people's stuff. So we take it on, or we let it impact us, or we let it sort of infiltrate into us. That is exhausting and draining and will really likely lead to some burnout. The next thing is having a lack of control or autonomy. If you work somewhere where you have someone always on your shoulder, if it's a coworker who's always looking over at what you're doing or criticizing or nitpicking or telling you how you should be doing something different, someone who always has their nose in your business, or if you have a boss who is really micromanagey and always right there and kind of doing the same thing, if you feel like you don't have any space, if you don't have any freedom, if you don't have any flexibility, that is very draining. It's exhausting. It's emotionally taxing. And then the next one, the last one here on our list, no social support. If you are working in a demanding job, if you have a lot on your plate, and if your work space is difficult, if there's a lot of interpersonal dynamics going on there, then you need some support. You need a soft landing somewhere. You need somewhere where you can go to be refueled, to talk about things, to vent about things, to work things through, or you need to get some support in learning how to have healthy boundaries, how to not get sucked into other people's stuff. You need support if you are working in a place like anything that I've talked about so far. So which one of these really connected with you? Maybe it was more than one. Maybe there's a few on here where you're like, oh my gosh, this is what I've been dealing with. Maybe you had a little bit of an idea of what's been happening, but now this just helped make things a lot more clear. Let me know in the comment section below, which one of these things in your work environment have you been dealing with? I would love to hear. And now the signs. So you've been dealing with all this stuff, or at least some of it. Now, what are the signs? How do you know that you're not just a little bit stressed out or a little bit overwhelmed versus getting to the point of total burnout? And now the first sign is if all of a sudden, or at least in the past little while, you've been having either a really hard time getting yourself to work, or you've been having a really hard time getting your work done in a day, or maybe even both. Even if before you weren't someone who would jump out of bed on a Monday morning, raring to go and excited to start the week, you at least were able to get yourself to work without a problem, and it was just what you needed to do, and it was just what you do, and maybe you like your job, maybe you love your job, maybe your job is just fine. But it wasn't an issue, and now all of a sudden it is, or you're at work and you're just not able to get your work done in the day. And it's not because of the work itself, it's because there's something in there that is kind of blocking you, or you're lacking the motivation, or you can't focus, or you can't concentrate, which we're going to talk more about in just a second. The next sign is that you feel pretty apathetic about your job, where all of a sudden you're just like, I don't really care. Maybe even start to get a little bit existential about it. What's the point? What's this really doing anyways? Whereas before, it wasn't like that. You do your job, maybe you felt some purpose and meaning with it, or maybe you just thought it was fine and this is just what you needed to do to live your life and to support yourself or have the things that you want, where all of a sudden now you're just sort of starting to question the whole thing. And now the next sign that you are getting close to burnout, or you are fully in it, is if you're finding that you're getting really irritated by your coworkers, by customers, or by clients, more so than you really ever did before. So maybe Marcy in the lunchroom has always chewed her with her mouth open, but now all of a sudden, when you're in there and you see it happening, it is taking everything in you to not bite her head off. And so maybe even sometimes you have to just get out of there altogether because it is bothering you so much. Whereas before you were like, yeah, it's kind of annoying, but like whatever. So if you notice yourself getting just like that flipping feeling in your stomach, or that like tightness in your chest, or that hotness in your head over things that never really used to chap your butt all that much, and now they're really getting to you, and you're finding it emotionally draining to be at work because everything is bugging you, irritating you, frustrating you. The next sign is, like I mentioned a minute ago, you can't really concentrate or pay attention. You find yourself, your mind drifting, you find yourself daydreaming, you find yourself just blanking out of nowhere, and this wasn't happening before. Yeah, that's a really good sign. The next one, you have really little energy and you don't really care about what you're doing. Whereas before, you were able to go to work, you were able to get your job done, you were probably pretty motivated, you felt good about the things that you're accomplishing and the tasks you were completing, and now you just don't have any energy to do any of it. It takes you way longer to get something done than it did before, and you really actually don't even care whether or not you do get it done, and you're just sort of one foot in front of the other, white knuckling it to the end of the day, or to the end of the project, or the end of the assignment, or the end of the task. You're just trying to get through it, and you don't really care. The next one is that you are either drinking more, or starting to use drugs, or you are eating more. You are trying to cope or buffer your emotions. That all that stuff is drinking and drugging and overeating. It's to try and buffer our emotions when our emotions are feeling too intense, or we're feeling emotionally out of control, or we just need some kind of escape because we can't cope with what's going on. So if you notice that that is happening, maybe you've gained a bunch of weight in the past few months. You're like, why have I gained so much weight? Well, chances are, maybe even without you even knowing it, you're emotionally eating, or you've been drinking way more, and you're like, it used to take me several days to drink a bottle of wine, or I'd only really have wine on the weekend, and now I'm getting through a bottle of wine in a day or two. Yeah, that's an issue. That's a sign. And then the next sign is if you've been letting your health routines go down the crapper. If you're somebody who typically moves their body on a regular basis as a way to manage stress and move through emotion and fill yourself up so that you have the energy to be outputting at the level that you are on a daily basis at your job, but you haven't been doing that, it's as if you are showing up. No, it isn't as if you are. You're showing up at your job, expecting yourself to perform at the same level, but you're doing it on an empty tank. And the math there doesn't add up. Giving a lot when you have basically nothing is not a sustainable strategy. I was actually talking recently to someone who is on the cusp of burnout, and we were talking about how she has been working 14-hour days, which is an issue in and of itself. I know some jobs, sometimes it's necessary, especially during deadline time and all that kind of stuff, but this has been going on for 3 months. She's been working 14-hour days, and she's now actually also a triathlete. and she's used to training on a daily basis. She loves it. It's so important to her. It's part of her stress management. It's just part of her, it brings her joy in her life. It's part of her self-care, and she hasn't been doing that. And that in and of itself, along with the boundary issue that comes with working 14-hour days on a regular basis, have been the two things that have been causing the majority of her burnout. The next one is if you're having trouble sleeping. That is a really good sign. If you're laying awake at night, obsessing about your job, thinking about your job, if you can't turn your brain off, if you're worried about missing something, or if you're stressing about all the things that you need to get done the next day, if you are thinking about your job a lot and it's causing you a lot of anxiety and a lot of stress, that's a really good sign, my friends. The next one is if you have kind of headaches and backaches and jaw aches and stomach aches or other kind of health related things that have started coming up out of nowhere. That's because of stress. And your body is protesting. Your body is shutting down. Your body's saying, hey, listen to me. This is not okay. You're asking too much from me. You're pushing me too hard, and I'm going to let you know. But then we often just ignore it, or we just take more Tylenol, or we just pretend that it's not there, or whatever. Or we drink more, or we start taking drugs, or whatever it is to even deal with that physical discomfort. If you notice that your body is protesting, pay attention. It is trying to speak to you. It is trying to send you a message. It is saying, this is not okay, and I'm breaking down under all the pressure. The next sign is if you just all of a sudden stopped caring about your appearance. And not to say that we're supposed to be like obsessed about how we look and self-conscious and always just trying to look a perfect way. But if you're someone who typically takes care of yourself, showers regularly, gets dressed and puts a little bit of an effort and intention into what you're wearing to your job, and all of a sudden you're like, I don't care. I'm just going to go with like 7-day greasy hair and whatever I just find on the floor or next to the laundry basket, and you just stopped caring, or you've just sort of like let yourself go, whereas typically that's not how you would show up. And it's not because you're like, I'm just going to be natural and I'm just going to be authentic and I'm just going to like be fully me and I don't need anything to prove on the outside. Okay, that's different than some fundamental change because you've stopped caring. The next one is if you feel trapped. If you feel trapped at your job, if you feel trapped in your life, if you just feel this sense of like, I just need to get out of here, but I can't. There's nowhere I can go. There's nothing I can do. I have to keep doing this and I hate it. And you've got this like internal battle going on a regular basis. That's another really good sign. The next one is if you notice yourself crying unexpectedly. And this can be men or women, typically a little bit more for women because that's often how we express overwhelming emotion is through crying. But if you notice yourself just crying at the snap of a finger, at the drop of a pin, little things, or maybe you just notice yourself crying for no reason out of nowhere and you're like, oh my gosh, yes, that is your body releasing that energy because there's so much energy pent up inside that crying out of nowhere is our body's physiological, natural way to try to move through that tension. It's trying to release it. That is a really good sign that you are nearing burnout. The next one is if you're having relationship problems in your friendships, in your romantic relationships, even maybe in your work relationships, that you notice yourself being more combative, being more tense, being more frustrated, saying things, lashing out, being more critical, just being more kind of angry and prickly and pokey in general. And it's having an impact on your work relationships and even your most important relationships with your partner, with your kids, with your close friends, with your parents, with whoever. Everyone is irritating you. Everyone is getting on your nerves and you are lashing out because you've got no reserve. You've got nothing left. You are depleted. You are done. You are at the end of your rope. Any of these connect with you? Have you noticed several of these? If you have one or two of these, you may not be on like nearing burnout. There may be something else that's going on in your life. So that's also something to get curious about. But if you have several of them, then chances are you are right on the cusp. And you might be wondering, like, Julia, a lot of these signs sound a lot like symptoms of depression. And yes, absolutely. Burnout can cause depression. If left unchecked, it oftentimes will result in depression. This is a big deal. It's not just about being like, oh, I'm a little stressed out. Okay, if you are a little stressed out, but if you're being honest with yourself and you're not just a little stressed out, but not just that you're, in a little bit of a funk, listen to yourself with that one. When it comes to boundaries, this is a big one. This is one of the biggest causes of burnout, is a lack of boundaries, that overfunctioning, that people pleasing, that not being able to say no thing. I have a free resource for you. It's called 25 Ways to Say No. This is going to get you started. If saying no is an issue for you, this is going to get you started on some just simple, gentle ways to say no for those of us who have a hard time with it. You can grab that download. I'm going to put the link in the description below. If wanting to work a little bit deeper on the anxiety and even if there's self-doubt, like that ego stuff coming up, that self-doubt coming up that's causing you to overfunction in these ways, to people please and to perfect in these ways, then I want you to check out the information on my breakthrough coaching program. The wait list is open right now, and so I'm going to put the link to that below as well. You can look through that, see if you think that it's the right fit for you, get on the wait list so that you are the first to know when we do open up registration. I'm so glad you're here. If this connected with you, if a lot of these things made sense to you, pay attention. It's not a joke. It's serious. If there's smoke, chances are there's fire. Listen to that. Subscribe to the channel. Like the video. If you liked it, I appreciate so much those of you who show your appreciation for this content. If you found it valuable, please do be sure to give a thumbs up and let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. Love connecting with you guys. Till next time, take good care.